States. They have a lot of the leading companies, right? We're going to see a lot more climate disasters in the coming 4 years. They're going to err in all sorts of other ways by overreaching. So can't you imagine a scenario where the Green Coalition pushes back, right? And maybe we're stuck moving backwards and forth, back and forth across these two, but I don't know if the battle's been won yet.
Yeah. 19, Trump issued an executive order commanding all American corporations to come home. And they all went, what? Like, no, we're not going to do that. This time might be slightly different, particularly if you have an export-heavy model in that country and you start to get tariffs on it. Suddenly it's much cheaper to make in the United States. So the idea is exactly that. It is essentially to bring this stuff home. It will organically sprout up. You insulate the economy. You then create through immigration policy a labor shortage. Right? That labor shortage then increases the demand for labor. The demand for labor then creates a kind of Kaldor-Vardoon effect on a massive scale. This is the idea behind it, at least. That ultimately this will force businesses to increase productivity. That could be investments in AI, other technologies, etc. And ultimately what that does is a massive, more efficient redeployment of a smaller labor pool, which gives you higher output. And that's the thinking behind it, but there's a big gap.
Isn't that like exactly what we should be fucking doing, or I guess what we kind of are now doing?
That's what we've been saying.
Yeah,
right.
Like that's what he just said is exactly verbatim what we should be fucking doing. Yeah,
yeah, right. You know what I mean? Like this is the problem. Okay, so like, all right, why did Rome never fucking industrialize?
Mass immigration and slavery.
Massive amounts of slavery, right? It just throw bodies at shit, right? So, you know,
same reason why the South was bad at industrialization.
Yes, right. So what happens when you get rid of the really cheap labor force?
See, I heard this argument from it was I think it was from the World Economic Forum of all things, and he was like this German guy or this Belgium guy,
right?
And this was from like a year ago, maybe like 2 years ago, but he was saying that actually Japan might be a leading economy again because as AI goes up and in general, like the number of people goes down, they're going to have the most interest and push in maintaining a first world civilization while having a declining population, and this is actually going to work out very well for them. A fucking German from the WEF of all things was saying that, and that's nuts. But yeah, anyway, okay, let's keep listening.
All right.
Up in the math, which is, and how are you going to make all that stuff that you've forgotten how to do, right? And nobody is fully self-sufficient. I mean, even the United States, there's the 20% openness essentially is how to think about it. But it still can do a fair bit, and it still will trade, but will trade very much on those much more aggressive terms. So I think there's a big flaw in the plan, and I think you've identified it, but I think that's the plan nonetheless.
I think Chase.
All right, hang on, bro, because I found some more stuff that you're gonna want to listen to. Hang on, man. Fucking. All right, political power, like. Okay. All right, here.
Many years has been talking about the Green Coalition also.
Yeah.
But where is the Green Coalition in the US? Is it just it can't be just that it's too early because there were green interests before. And in a way, Tesla was the world's supposed to be the Western world's leading green, the biggest plank in any green coalition, and yet the man is the president.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly, right.
So helping empower the carbon pollution. So what's not working here?
So that slide that I had there, which is basically how we used to think about carbon assets and what's actually going on, what's stranded and what's not. I think the Democrats still think they're in a world whereby insurance costs matter, relative costs matter. Once green stuff becomes super cheap, then everyone will install it. And they're completely naked to the power side of this, which is you don't have to play that game. And if you can control political power, you can write regulations and legislation to make sure that's the case. And Texas is just the best example of this. I mean, 40% of their stuff is green. And now that basically the Republicans have won, they're just unleashing the forces of the state to rein it in. Now, will they still have it? Are they going to shut down all the windmills? No, they need it. Absolutely. They need it to keep the air conditioning on. They don't have enough capacity just now, but they'd rather have gas because they've got that too. And that basically empowers the same people that are in power and keeps that coalition together. So I think that basically there's two games being played and people don't realize they're being played in a different game. That is to say the Republicans are just way ahead of this one in terms of using this as an offensive strategy. Now, to relate this back to the political science literature, right? I think Niels's piece with Jonas Schnam is in Perspectives, right? I think that really captures something that was going on. I don't think that's going on now. I just don't see those coalitions. If you think about, for example, all the investment that Ford put into electrification, right? At the end of the day, Ford is a pretty small manufacturer that essentially makes trucks and the Mustang. That's what they do. They make big ass petrol engines. That's what they're good at to the extent they're good at anything, right? They don't know how to make EVs. They're crap, they're expensive, right? So they were enticed into doing this through loads of tax cuts. And now they're no longer going to be enticed. So they're simply not going to do it. They're going to just go back to doing what they normally do. So I think that those decarbonizable coalitions were there if the policy regime behind it was right and you could align the interests. But now you've got a policy regime, an emerging policy regime that's like, we're just not going to do that. And the companies will fall in line. I wouldn't be surprised if Musk sacrifices Tesla.
Yes.
Basically lets it go to the wall. Because 40% of their profits are carbon credits. And you can bet your bottom dollar the carbon credit market's going to be wiped out.
Maureen?
Happy, happy, happy.
What do you think?
Yeah, that is a good question.
What's up?
Well, so like Elon Musk, he's been in charge of Doge, and as far as I can tell, he's doing a pretty good job. He's auditing everybody. It's great. We're finding a whole bunch of misallocations of funds or whatever. Something tells me that Elon Musk is not going to touch with a 10-foot pole EV subsidies, right? Like, for whatever reason, that'll just never show up in the Doge thing.
No. Right? Like, actually, I was on Substack earlier and somebody was like mentioning some shit about this, how like they're not like talking about any of these type of things. But like even with like, and they have been clapping them green things, right? Like the green DEI bullshit that they've been fucking doing, you know what I mean? Which is basically just all wasted garbage. You know, like this is, you know what I mean? Just like how, I don't know, like Elon's not going to try and fuck himself over, but I think he kind of is going to, he's eventually going to have to. You know what I mean? Where he goes like, man, listen, these motherfuckers are basically just wasting fucking money. You know what I mean?
I want to respond to something that someone said in your chat.
Word.
They said more nuclear would be nice, not decommissioning working reactors and bringing new ones online with improvements where applicable. All right. There's an issue with nuclear. And potentially it's a larger issue than with the whole oil thing. The fact of the matter is that there's just not enough uranium. I mean, when we figure out fusion, I mean that'll be dope. You know, I think that we should be putting a whole bunch of money into fusion research so we can turn hydrogen into power. I mean, that's going to be awesome when we finally figure that out. In 10 years, it'll be 10 years away. But uranium, there's a limited amount of it. and governments want to hold on to uranium because it's also good for making bombs. I looked it up, and it was like if we went to if we ran 100% of our electricity on fission nuclear reactors, and we just use a whole bunch of uranium and whatever the hell, we'd only actually be able to last 20 years on a 100% uranium based energy sector.
Yeah.
So that tells you how much uranium we have. It's not like we can say, oh yeah, like fucking, uranium is the future. It's not. We're gonna run out of it. Probably faster than we will oil. So nah, dude, there's issues with that. Like and also, like I said, we need to keep it around for making bombs.
Well, I mean, like, we really don't need the bombs. The bombs are fucking unnecessary. There's a lot. We can use plutonium. We can use.
No, they're cool as shit.
Well, I'm not gonna agree with you on that. I don't like fucking nuclear bombs. Did you ever see the video of me like trolling the fucking nuclear scientist?
No.
Yeah, so like I caught some of them doing a live stream out of some college somewhere, right? And like I hopped on that bitch, and I motherfucking hopped in the chat, and I just started asking them like questions with super chats about like how they could be effective. You know what I mean? When like they're basically have zero power whatsoever to change anything, right? And like I fucking just kept fucking with them until they started cursing and yelling and shit. It was hilarious.
Nice.
Nobel Prize winning fucking, you know what I mean, like nuclear physicist just cursing on TV or on fucking YouTube. It was great. All right, man, listen, who done joined the motherfucking chat?
Sorry, that was me. I remember speaking with you on political debate Discord back in the day.
Oh yeah, man. What up, man? Fucking yeah, like
How you doing?
Yeah, my Discord got nuked to shit, bro. Like I could literally like they didn't I didn't got clapped. It was bad, right? Like, yo,
You were being naughty.
Listen, they called me a terrorist, right? I'm not a terrorist. Like I'm a radical gardener, apparently. Apparently it's crazy to say we should be gardening. You know what I mean? But like it is what it is, right? You want to join the live stream in the thing? We're over here watching this fucking video about Mark Blythe giving a speech about all the things that are going on, him being super based about shit. Here, check this out about the EU. Y'all gonna love this.
China, and US policy, in my estimation, will push the EU and China much closer together over the next decade. What's the reasons for thinking this? Well, Jonas Nam's excellent book, Countries with Leading Edge Export Sectors Can Adapt to Green Tech Easier. And guess what you got? China and Germany and the whole European supply chain. And they're not going to be able to do diesel engines anymore, so they need to go into something else. The size of the decarbonal coalition is much smaller. Very few European polities have a definable carbon sort of sector. Norway's one of them. That's basically it. There's not that much. Everybody's an importer and in a sense has an interest in getting off oil as fast as you possibly can. So it makes sense to do this. The US historically has been good on innovation, but stops at IPOs and exits, and all of that's about to be crushed by policy. So the US are not going to pick up this space, so it's there for the EU to take. And if we assume the US gets 2 electoral cycles out of carbon dominance, because they will get a lot of growth over the next several years, the US risks becoming dependent on green tech made elsewhere when the carbon binge finally comes to an end. At the end of it, carbon dominance is a very effective short-term growth and political strategy, but long-term, it's a dollar killer. So they want off the dollar anyway because it's hollowing them out. And the strategy they've got to get them off there, paradoxically, is going to hasten that decline even further. So we're playing a very, very high stakes game, right, that I think involves both of these things, decarbonization and de-dollarization. So short-term take home, starting in 2025, the US doubles down on carbon dominance and radical deregulation. Short-term US carbon-related ROI, return on investment, will go through the roof, and US green tech valuations will crash. Get your shorts in now, Eric. Short-term green investments lose value. Longer-term, US loses leadership in the green adaptive tech space. The EU sides with China on the green transition and shifts the decarbonization tech to the rest of the world over time. The US dollar order is already hollowing out US productive capacity, such that both the GOP and the Democrats are calling time on it. Carbon dominance will hasten that demise. The US wins short term in a carbon short world, but no longer wants to play hedge fund to the world. And I think actually there's the real kicker there. The longer term take home in a carbon short world, US doubles down on carbon assets, ROI increases, as I said. Problem is new supply still coming on. Other people can play the carbon game who are not in Europe. So Argentina's about to have massive reserves come online. Brazil's already pumping out the basal salts. Guyana has enormous reserves. Indonesia's about to bring them on. What are you going to get? You're going to get a price crash. So the very thing that you're doubling down on is actually everybody else can play that game. It's not clear to me. You want cheaper energy, but you don't want to get to a point where your frackers are outcompeted and you no longer become one of the important producers if you're doubling down on carbon. The only way you can make that work is to really start to insulate the economy at the level of capital controls. And I don't think they really want to go there, but there is definitely a bug in the software in the fact that other people can play this game too. Liquid natural gas is only a transition fuel for the EU and China. For the United States, it's basically how they're going to do things. So they've got they're long gas. China next year will install twice the rest of the world's solar capacity and 1 times wind. If interest rates remain high, EU states will start to own power infrastructure directly. This is my prediction of the next 5 years. That ultimately private sector is going to fail on this one, given the very low return on investment that you get, and ultimately states are going to have to do this. They also have to reindustrialize in a green way. If you're serious about this, it's all, as Eric did in his book, it's all about electricity. And ultimately, one of the ways you get over the Brett Christopher's problem is you own the asset directly, or you regulate it in such a way that you create sustainable profits. Automotive gas could peak by 2031. I think that's hugely important for another sort of like end of the carbon cycle. And what happens if 10 years out oil demand collapses, reindustrialization fails, and the US is basically a carbon commodity producer in a post-carbon world?
Okay,
at that
pause
point,
that.
the current account.
By the way, what's going on, Breaker? We're live stream right now. That sounded to me like a whole bunch of bullshit. That sounded dumb.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
he's making the assumption that the world is just gonna go anti-carbon.
All right.
And that's
well. Here's the problem. The EU, right, and Asia do not have much in the way of carbon, right? They don't have a lot of oil. All right. So the best way for them to be able to do things is to, you know what I'm saying, like use electricity. Right. So they're going to do everything they can is just to go like solar and wind or whatever the case is. Right. Because that makes sense for them.
All right. So here's my question, right?
Okay.
How much of this kind of anti-carbon movement is based off of the morality of it, or the green thinking of it, or whatever the hell that kind of position is? Like, how much of it is based off of what, you know, like this fucking what they want the world to be, as opposed to actual sound economic? This
is all sound economic shit.
I'm not sure, man.
Like, listen, the EU was going like full green, hardcore shit, right? And then they backed off it, right? Because it didn't make any sense financially, right?
Well, Germany didn't. Germany's still
no,
Germany's
not, right? But like, so they don't have any oil in Germany, right? That's it. No oil, no natural gas. And so they're fully reliant upon either
They did
Russia,
have nuclear.
did, right. They
Wait a
They either
minute.
go to Russia or Norway to get their shit.
That kind of makes me agree with what General Chief was saying. Has this guy brought up nuclear yet, especially for like, because Asia doesn't have to care about this weird paranoia that's been cultivated in the Western world since the fall of Hiroshima, that somehow nuclear power plants equal China syndrome. We're going to blow up the world with meltdowns, but that's not how they work, because it's R-worded. fucking propaganda. I mean, if he has it, but especially when talking about Asia, like, why would China
All right.
not build
Remember the last
nuclear
time,
power
remember the
plants
last
everywhere?
time we talked, Breaker, right? Remember how I said I had a video that General's gonna like hate, but like me and you were gonna love?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
This is
skipping,
that video.
Yeah, I'm skipping around this video a little bit, trying to, you know what I mean, like make it, palatable, right? Or general, right? You know what I mean? But like, yeah, so there is mentions of like nuclear power, but the thing is number one, nuclear takes like 5 to 10 years to come online, right? And the amount of energy you put in versus the amount of energy you get out is kind of like one of those things where it's like, return on investment's iffy, right? And on top of that, they don't last really, really long. The nuclear reactors go out very, very quickly. They have to be put on a source of water. China's running out of fucking water. Like, there's a lot of these type of issues. You know what I mean?
I think it takes like roughly 10 years for it to like return the investment with energy output, with the amount of time you took to bring it online and the amount of investments you made to get it online.
Mm-hmm. And then uranium's expensive too.
I don't know the exact figures, but I bet that the return on investment for solar farms probably isn't that great either. I mean, like you can just let them sit, and that's great, but they really don't produce a lot of energy for how much land they have to take up. Look, my position here is simple. Carbon is the best energy source that we have for the time being. Like, obviously, eventually we're going to have to get off of it because we're going to run out. But for the time being, it is the best thing. And if I was king of the planet, I would use all of my excess energy from all this carbon we have to only pursue fusion, because that's the only answer at a longer time span. This whole solar wind thing. I think it's kind of a fad. Like, I understand this guy, this smart economist, is saying that, oh no, it's the future. I don't believe that. I don't think that's true.
I mean, the solar and wind thing, like solar makes sense, right? And it's long term, right? That's the cool thing about solar, right? Like, there's still solar panels online right now that were put in like the 70s.
I mean, my old calculator that I used to use in school, it was actually solar powered.
I remember that too. Like, listen, and that thing was a piece of shit. But like, you could literally run it over with a truck and it would keep working.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Right. But like, this is the thing, right? Fucking, I'm sitting here trying to find this shit. Like, fucking, yeah, but like solar panels and wind work in some places. They just don't work in all of them. Right. And that's kind of where we are. So like, they're going to try and get off. It's not just solar and wind. It's also like hydropower and fucking all the other things that you can do that are renewable. They're going to do the best they can. You know what I mean?
I 1,000,000%. I'm in favor of hydroelectric and geothermal. That just makes sense. We should be doing more of that where we can, where it's applicable. I mean, for hydroelectric, you have to have a big river. For geothermal, you have to be near a volcano. That's why Iceland has a lot of geothermal things. Those make sense. I'm 100% in favor of doing those, but I don't know, man. I'm dubious about this green revolution that is suddenly like China's going to be on top of, and they're going to be energy dominant in the world because they have a whole bunch of solar panels. I don't see it. I don't think it makes sense. Also, exporting solar power is really difficult. It's easy to export or import a barrel of gas. Solar power, not so much. I mean, how do you export sunlight?
All right, listen, check this out. All right, here.
Cars and cats.
Let me show you why this guy is based and why I really like listening to him. All right, check this out for about like 5-6 minutes.
Left panel there is the R square between economic growth and carbon use. Quite tight, isn't it? And then you got on the right-hand panel, countries that have managed to basically deindustrialize, like the United Kingdom, but you do that by basically stop making things. That's really all it is. Now, the problem with this is deindustrialization is a one-shot game with one-shot gains. Once you've done it, you can't deindustrialize again. It was like Liz Truss trying to be Thatcher again. It's like, once you've privatized the banking system, you can't do it again, right? It's already private, right? You can't do it twice. Economic growth is the main way democracy deals with distributional conflict. Deindustrialized economies grow slower, which increases the distributional trade-offs. Countries can avoid slower growth by pumping credit. Yeah, that's what Britain's done for years, but that makes inequality worse and the economy more fragile, and polarization increases and public investment becomes politicized. And that's basically where we find ourselves, and decarbonization gets harder because of this. Now, this is where I think this is really germane for the United States. What does this have to do with carbon politics? US political polarization for me is really the coming apart of the carbon coalition. If you have a look at the top panel, what you've got states producing the most CO2, and then you've got the electoral map with the Republicans. I mean, there's a pretty clear link in this one, right? More specifically, in 1970, the reason politics wasn't, but this is Tom Oatley's work on this, which is brilliant. The reason that politics wasn't polarized, and we used to talk about the Republicans and the Democrats as being Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and there's no differences between them, is because everybody was part of one growth model. And that growth model was an industrial growth model that existed up until the mid-1970s and early 1980s. In 1971, 1 in 5 jobs were in the auto sector. 1 in 5, right? And 1 in 3 in related industries such as steel. The oil shocks in the 70s, the shift to services, outsourcing in the 80s and 90s concentrates carbon assets in specific states. Those states are now the core of the Republican coalition. Start off with Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, frackers and oil, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, West Virginia. What do? Fuels, farms, fertilizer, feedstock. That's how they make their money. What I'm doing just now is a state-by-state analysis and trying to basically define what the local growth models of these states are, as if they were independent economies. And it runs right through the carbon coalition. This is what they have in common. Some of them a bit more diverse, and they're the ones that are targeted by the IRA. We'll talk about that in a minute. One thing that I got that turned me on to this a couple of years ago, I was at a finance conference in the US, and there was a fund manager who ran one of the pension funds. I think he was in Oklahoma. And we were talking about decarbonization and all this sort of stuff. And he said, we're never going to go for that. And I said, why not? I mean, you're a big flat piece of land. You can stick up loads of windmills. We don't want to do this. And he says, well, we know what happened the last time anybody trusted anyone to do this. It was called the Midwest. So there was meant to be trade assistance and adjustment, product financing, and labor was meant to be retrained, and nothing happened. And Detroit lost 60% of its population. And on a zip code level, if you look at David Otter's data, you've got zip code level losses of $7,000 in some zip codes per capita. This is absolutely devastating. So these carbon states are looking at that and saying, so let me get this straight. You Democrats want us to do what? You want us to give up the whole thing that we've got that gives us our way in the world, and you're going to give us windmills? Yeah, no, that's not happening. So built into this is already an emergent fault line. It's the realization that their assets are the ones that are about to be stranded. And this is a functional business model. This is one that works. This is one that creates employment, jobs, incomes, the whole. And then they're going to give this up because you might have a green economy, whatever that means. They're just not going to go for it. Some people have flagged this. My colleague.
What do you think?
Well, but the core, if you go back to the last slide, like just rewind like 5 seconds. Okay. Yeah, he said fuels, farms, fertilizer, feedstock. Yeah, that is like a huge backbone of the American economy, and like that's hopefully that fucking never goes away. Like that. I mean, food and fuel is important for humans. Like that's not like a temporary thing. That's as long as we're humans and like the AI doesn't wipe us out, that's going to be permanent.
Well, I mean, but like,
Besides, we need carbon.
yeah, they want to get rid of the fuel though, right? And they want to get rid of like, you know, what I mean, like the fertilizer, like all these type of things that allow these motherfuckers to continue to survive, right? And then put up windmills and solar panels in their place.
Yeah, and that would be really dumb.
Yeah, I agree.
It would be.
Right?
And the whole CO2 argument is like retarded.
Oh, the CO2 argument makes no sense. It's a negative feedback cycle.
Yeah. Right.
So their reasoning isn't sound. And plus, if you look at solar panels, they're regulated by the U.S. to be no more than some very small percent efficient. They're not even juiced the way they're supposed to.
You know what? As long as we have a small audience listening to this, I do want to take a moment to stand up on my soapbox and talk about the CO2 thing, just briefly. All right. So what happens when you put more CO2 into the atmosphere?
That's correct.
Well, it's what plants crave, exactly. And so plants have these things on their leaves called stomata, and they have to open them up to breathe CO2. Now, when they open them up, they lose water because plants are a pretty water-dense organism. So in order to get CO2, they have to lose water. It's just kind of the game that plants play. If you increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, then plants don't have to open up their stomata as much, which means that they lose less water. That means that areas that are drier, like deserts or whatever, become more hospitable for plants. You increase CO2, you make more plants happen, especially in desert areas. This is a negative feedback cycle. CO2 is not an issue. There's a whole bunch of fucking issues that we have, like, microplastics and BPAs and whatever the fuck's in the water and all that kind of stuff. I'm anti-pollution in general, but CO2 specifically is a problem that nature takes care of itself. It's like the last thing we should be worried about. There it is.
Well, hold on, General. Wait a minute. Isn't CO2 like 102% of the atmosphere? And it's evil patriarchal bigotry that causes it to grow so much?
That's true. No, sorry, I forgot about that. How dare you?
Don't forget about the cow farts.
Yeah, methane is really deadly in a box with a fucking plant. So what percent of the atmosphere is actually CO2?
What is it, like
0.04%. 0.04. So even if you were able to adjust it by like 1,000,000%, is it really worth all this fucking hemming and hawing? Which is not possible. No one's going to move it 1,000,000%.
And
But
you
crazy.
know what else? When the dinosaurs were around, there was like 10 times as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Yep.
And we had dinosaurs and shit. All right. I think our issue is that we don't have enough carbon dioxide. If we had more, we could be dinosaurs.
Well, by the
It was
way,
almost 0.5%. It was almost 0.5% in the dinosaur era with megafauna, you're saying?
Hell yeah.
by the way, we're only 350 parts per billion of CO2. If it goes down by 350 more parts per billion, massive amounts of plants go extinct.
Right, and
So
then we
it's that
certainly live
close.
without plants. Can't we live without all plant life though? Because we have to save the environment.
You know, when it
isn't
comes to the
worth it kill all the plants?
patriarchy, when it
To
comes
save
to
the
things about
environment.
patriarchy, it's worth it.
Get rid of the
I think you're just a bigot.
I
Is
love
the
that.
problem?
Yeah, I
Don't
mean,
you understand? We have to kill the plants to save the environment because CO2 is man-made.
Well,
Like
you know,
We need to spend like
something-
$1 zillion on this.
something
Brilliant.
trans people. You know, trans people, they may have less plant-based ropes to utilize for various purposes if there were less plants. So it is a good thing.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. Skipping rope. Because that's what they do.
yeah,
Let's call it that.
going back. Yeah, but like, listen, this is all gonna be solved here soon anyway, because like by the end of like this century, there's gonna be like half the fucking people that there are.
Word. Who gets them?
Well, it is, I guess, I'm not necessarily opposed to a smaller amount of total humans on the planet. Like maybe 9 billion is like a little bit too many. And
I think 4 billion is too many.
Okay, Bill
probably.
Gates.
But here's the thing, right? If the planet is better off with less people, then isn't it a good thing that we don't have to kill them, but instead they just choose not to reproduce?
I agree.
I mean, Pnoid here is obviously a bad example of that, but like a lot of people are just choosing not to have kids.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't afford to have children. That's the other issue.
Everybody can afford to have
yeah.
kids. You're just not willing to make like the necessary life
Sacrifices.
choices to do it. Yeah.
People are more concerned with, having children in their household for long term. They're not looking at living like a fucking person. They're trying to be like, let's factory produce these kids, kick them out when they're all 18 so we can be alone to do boomer shit.
Well, yeah, that was I was the child of that, and that was super dumb. But if a caveman that actually, the thing is that we all come from cavemen, right? Like and they were unemployed and they still managed to make us, if an unemployed guy in a cave can manage to raise a family, I think anyone today can, in theory.
Can't argue with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest issue of like all things is just a job instability thing, and the government offering like women all the shit. But then again, on the same level, if you're willing to just go like, yeah, listen, go ahead, bitch, we'll get on fucking welfare, and I can like raise my kids and not have to like fucking deal with all the extracurricular bullshit, and just be a dad and not have to deal with like the female part of it. It's actually like not a terrible trade-off in the end of the day. Granted, you're gonna be cutting some money out of your check, but like, fuck, it's not horrible, and then you get to like have the best of both worlds. You can go and like be that dude that, he's a coyote and fucks all the bitches, and still, like fucking raise your kids and do the shit you want to do and like be that person and reproduce.
Wait, but what if the state just raises your kids? What if you just have kids?
Yeah.
And then what you do is you pay like for the rest of your life to the woman for the opportunity of having impregnated her once, and she just takes your money through like the system forever, and the kids go to the state anyway. Like
No. Actually, there is a group of people that figured out how to exploit the system the best. Super smart. So, if you look at the African American community, right? What you do as a dude is you have sex with like 20 bitches. The state pays for them and raises them on your behalf. You ain't got no money, so it's not like you have to pay child support, and then you win, right? You make a whole bunch of copies of yourself, and the state pays for it. Done. Fucking easy.
Maybe you're talking about like juvie.
Based. All right, so like, listen, we're gonna keep going with this video a little bit here. Fucking, this is like a new part of this. I want you to like fucking see what's going on with the dollar general, right? Because like this is super interesting too.
Link between the US dollar and emergent carbon cleavage. So the first one is this. The US dollar regime, and I'm going to substantiate this hopefully in the next 20 minutes. The US dollar regime is in the process of being disowned by the US itself. And the electoral success of what I call the carbon coalition will doom it further. So the US dollar is on the way out, and it's actually the US that is authoring this. This will have global consequences for decarbonization and possibly not necessarily bad ones. And I'm going to try and make that rather controversial claim as well. All right, so should we worry about the almighty dollar? Here's the standard charts. Have a look at shares of foreign exchange reserves. Nah, nothing's happening. So denomination of trade, still the largest thing. Debt securities, still there, right? Nothing much seems to change. This is pretty much a standard story. And then whenever there's a shock to the system, no matter how small, the usual suspects are rounded up and interrogated. So the first one is, can the euro and the renminbi be alternatives? And the answer is no, because they're export-led growth models and they can't run the necessary deficit. So that's not going to happen. What about RMB invoice in Asia? Well, it's likely, but it's not threatening, because basically you're talking about something that's not a huge chunk of the world's trade GDP. What about the BRICS and the Saudis and SDRs? Well, that's unlikely and not threatening, so that's not going to happen. What about a synthetic BRICS payment crypto is the latest idea. Possible, but again requires very high levels of trust and also willingness to withstand US pressure, because they would be very unhappy if you did this. Trump, of course, gave a brilliant masterclass on how not to run a hegemonic currency when he shouted out about 2 months ago, you have to use the dollar. It's like, dude, if you want people to use the dollar, that's the one thing you don't say in public. Don't do, whatever, anyway. So anyway, nothing much happens. So what does the US dollar's global role do to the US over time? This is what I think is important, and I don't think we're thinking enough about. If you haven't listened to the Odd Lots 3-part podcast on the history of the euro markets, do it. It's utterly brilliant. It's so good. But basically, the US dollar's global role is kind of an accident of the euro markets, right? So euro markets get established in the 1950s, basically to get trade going, trade invoicing going, give the city of to get back on their feet after the war. Then the Americans begin to like it because it's a place to hide excess dollars when you're still on a fixed peg. Then Bretton Woods falls apart and they become really useful for basically running petrodollars. So, this market continues. And now we're in the bizarre situation whereby more dollars are issued outside of the United States than inside. And that's why it has this global role. And these are unbacked liabilities, right? Essentially, the people issuing these dollars do not have the Fed as a lender of last resort. So what that means is ultimately the world's central bank is the Fed, simply by the fact that they're the only one that can credibly commit to give credit to the system and liquidity to the system. As the world globalized in the 90s and 2000s, the East Asian countries stressed exports, with the US and the Anglos continuing to do the imports. The exporters needed a savings asset. The only thing liquid enough and cash-like is the US dollar and US dollar assets. This enables the US to basically ignore the current account constraint, and that juices demands for exports on the other side of the world. Rinse and repeat. That's the world we've been in for the past 20 years. Who said this best? Klein and Pettis. Trade wars or class wars. The US doesn't have an effective current account constraint. The problem is the one that Keynes identified right back at the time of Bancor. You've got too many exporters. These exporters suppress consumption in the exchange rate to earn US dollars. That creates an asset liability mismatch because they don't actually use dollars. And also, if they turned that without any sterilization directly into currency, what would happen is all their exports would start to become expensive because wages would rise and prices would rise. So you have to put a brake on that. When you do that, you then have a asset liability mismatch, and to turn it into an asset, you simply buy a treasury bill. It's the easiest way of doing it. So you buy another T-bill or another US asset, that lowers US rates and ultimately supports them having a permanent deficit. And so long as you keep doing this, this is fantastic. Now, what does this actually mean? It means the rest of the world is stuck with the US dollar and USA reaps the benefits. So again, that problem with too many exporters means that surplus countries have to bank into USD as a cash-like savings asset. Neither China nor the EU can provide this. Surplus countries need to suppress consumption. More US dollars outside than inside, which gives the enormous liquidity power to the Fed. And the dollar denominates trade in crucial commodities, which means de facto the US controls oil, gas, wheat, corn, soy, etc. via US dollar access. Right? So the real strength of the US is really the dollar. It's an incredible asset to have. The military and everything that it's got is enabled by the fact that you have this global role of the dollar. It's a bit like if you read Polanyi, and if you read IR and you learn about the balance of power.
Am I fucking retarded?
Yes, but why?
I agree with the conclusions that he came to, but I must be fucking retarded because I don't understand how he got there. Why? My understanding of currency, right, is that it has like a value or whatever. It's kind of like an ecosystem. It's like calories have a value. A rabbit has a certain amount of calories, that it has, and maybe like foxes like to eat them. It's like a dollar, it's like it has value, it has energy associated with it. It can keep people alive. But how it is that like this works on like a global system where like the treasury is making is issuing dollars outside of America that only theoretically exist, and a bank can just print theoretical dollars to make the whole like economy work and stuff like that. I don't understand it. I must be too fucking retarded.
It all goes back. Can I take a crack at it real quick, Tom?
Go ahead.
So you know the story about if it was just gold and you have country A and country B, let's say America and Japan, and America has all the gold, like you know this parable, right?
If America has all the gold, then and Japan is trying to sell boom boxes,
Right.
then we'll have to trade our gold for the boom boxes,
And then what happens?
and then at the end of a couple of years, we have a whole bunch of boom boxes and they have all the gold, and that is bad.
Correct. So the reason that we have the system we do today is that we don't need the gold. They got rid of it because France came to take it all, and they were like, yeah, well, we ain't got it. So we don't need gold. So instead, we have the bond market. And so in order to keep a long-term plan active, because people like having continuity in their lives. No one wants to be like, I'm going to go be a factory worker in 1950, but in 5 years, we're going to have all the gold. So I guess I'll just fucking figure it out then. You know, the government of Japan and all the rest of the world wants this to work for their lives. So we keep taking the shit from them. They keep taking our money, and in exchange, they balance the trade by buying our bonds. So, you know, these fucking mouth breathers will be like, China owns us. You know how much of their treasuries they own? Like, they're balancing the trade so that it is more advantageous for us to ship our labor to them. Well, that's what it became after NAFTA. Before, it was just balancing trade because we were buying their goods, but they didn't want to end up with all of our money. They had to be like, oh, here, take it back. And that establishes a system of like before gold became centrally banked, where you just have a bunch of IOUs. It's just ledgers. So unlike calories, which are a real thing, it's just to continue. So like, for instance, when a business, all businesses operate on terms. They can afford to go without actual cash. They need to pay their employees, but all of the money that they're expected to be due is on like a 30, 60, 90 receivable fucking timetable. That's all businesses. So we're all kind of floating in limbo, and we get our financial health assessed by all these lenders and shit by expected things on the books. And that scales all the way up to the tippy top. It's just a fucking huge game of like, you know, the shell game.
Also,
which is good and bad.
You have to remember, like those treasury bonds, right, are assets, right? They're not like dollars where they're liabilities. So like, it's like
they're our liability, right? It's their asset.
Wait, yeah, all right. So like, it's like the bank, right? So like when the bank loans you money, right? You know what I mean? That loan is an asset to the bank. The house is a liability, right? They don't want the fucking house because that means they got to make like fucking tax payments and fucking landscaping and upkeep and all that shit. They don't want to do that shit.
Facts.
They want the fucking loan, which is going to pay interest. Same with that fucking treasury bill that the fucking Chinese are buying and the rest of the world buys. It's an asset because it like gains interest, right? So they can borrow off of that fucking future interest payment. Right, so it allows them to be able to, you know what I mean, like run credit in their fucking countries. So like that's why they keep turning them the fuck over and over again. And that's how this shit works.
Because it keeps it going. It's basically just the lubricant that turns the gears.
Yep.
See, I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
Think of it this way: all of the
Wait,
profitability
hang on, Brett. Wait, what
is
don't
in
you
the
understand?
liability.
Yo, let him answer. What don't you understand about it?
Well, I feel like I can understand trading something for something else. That makes sense in my mind. But when you're inventing theoretical objects to trade theoretically off of theoretical debt, like I understand that it all theoretically works in our theoretical economy, but I must be retarded because it's not clicking in my brain.
Okay, so like, here's what you have to remember. All right, so what is Social Security and Medicare?
It's a theoretical thing that the government will pay to you when you get old.
All right. Does it exist yet?
No, as long as the
Okay,
Ponzi scheme continues to go on, it will.
Who's going to pay it?
The theoretical people in the future.
There we go. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
That's all this is.
But it's, I don't know.
Yeah. Again, like
Something-
this is all based on trust, dog.
Something in my gut tells me that a theoretical economy is not as good as a real economy.
No, that's not true. It has to be this way because otherwise you have way too much disruption. Like by drawing it out into the future, you get to, lower the hurdles and flatten out the fucking dips.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the big thing.
Because
Flatten.
real life is fucking choppy. Like you think of it as if it was your personal house, like economy.
Okay.
Like if you don't have the bill,
No.
paid.
No, this is really easy to understand. Okay, so like general, imagine, right, if like every time there was a drought or like a derecho or which is like a crazy windstorm or like some plague or fucking blight on a crop, right? All of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? They didn't have like fucking insurance and like fucking subsidies in order to pay for that, right? Because the government didn't have the ability to just hand out fucking free money. You know what I mean? And invent it out of thin air. Imagine how much like all of us, how hard it would hurt like average people if they couldn't buy like just basic shit like bread.
Well, in that case, our reality would be plagued with small but constant forest fires.
Yeah.
Which I'm willing to accept.
Yeah. Listen, we all are, right? But the thing is that the average human being doesn't want to have to live that way. They want to be able to just have a regular life and keep going to the grocery store and be full of food. And they're going to throw half of the shit the fuck away and then write it off on their fucking taxes. And the government just pays it and says, fuck it, we don't care.
But
this is how this
know,
works.
I maybe I'm a little bit of a
You're an idealist.
a conservative. Maybe I'm a bit of a conservative on this point.
Idealist, dog. You're an idealist, is what you are.
But I heard one time that like variability in life is inevitable, and trying to make that go away seems it just seems unnatural. Like it just seems fake and gay.
It is fake and gay.
Well,
but
it is fake and gay,
this
but
is
it
how
also
this
has
works.
pros and cons.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off, man. There's no solutions. Like even your solution, it's not going to work for everybody. Like I think we should all be Mad Max. Like what about old people and people with little kids? They don't want to live like that. They like this continuity fucking function.
Yo, do you remember like you ever like read about Rome, general? Like you ever just like,
what?
just in general, just like see Rome? You know what I mean? Just as a thing. Like remember like there was like a Rome, like a bunch of like people who were like Romans and soldiers and shit.
I have heard about that civilization.
Yeah. Like the reason why it worked is because like what they did was they went to Egypt, right? And they put a bunch of fucking soldiers there and told them you're gonna give us fucking grain no matter what. That's why it worked.
If we lived in a Mad Max kind of scenario,
You would die.
then well, yeah, I would probably die. There would be a lot of death.
Fucked a lot.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of death and unpleasantries. But I like to think about incentive structures.
Okay.
And in a Mad Max world, my incentive is to produce a strong son who will be able to rape and pillage the next town over, whatever he has to do, really. And then he will also be that's my retirement plan, right? Because he will be strong enough and whatever to make sure that I can retire peacefully in my bed, as opposed to being cannibalized by roaming marauders.
I'll do it. I'll eat you.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I'm also
so,
trying
like-
to kill your son the entire time.
Well, yeah, but that's why you have to produce a stronger, an even stronger son, right? And that, I don't know if that's the worst incentive structure. It keeps our species, you know, like from being feminized or weak. So, like
Right.
over the
Listen,
long term, that's
listen.
good.
What you want is you want enough peace that people can grow food and raise families, right? But like you want enough like fucking banana shit that they continue to be productive and not be lazy, right? You know, I mean, you kind of like want both of those things, right? So like you
Almost
gotta-
like a,
it's
almost
balance.
like a state of nature, if you will.
Yeah,
A balance.
Right now, at the moment, we are a little bit more towards like the chaotic side, right? At the second, like our basic lives are very, very easy, but like the ability for us to, you know, what I mean, like have like stability long term is difficult. Like it's just the things are kind of fucked up at the second, you know. So, but like understanding like all this shit we're talking about right now is literally just a result of having just way too many fucking people, right? First off, and then secondly, you know, what I mean, like us standing here, you know, trying to like have the people in power stay in power forever. That's what's going on.